The year is 1066. A new year dawns over England, but a shadow hangs heavy in the winter air. The great king, Edward the Confessor, is dead. For 24 years, he had ruled a prosperous but restless kingdom. Now, the throne of England, a prize of immense power and prestige, sits empty. The silence in the royal halls is deafening, filled with unspoken ambitions and the scent of coming conflict. In the heart of London, the Witenagemot, the Council of England's most powerful men, gathers in haste. They know the dangers of a vacant throne. England is a rich prize, coveted by many. A decision must be made, and quickly. Their choice falls upon one of their own, Harold Godwinson, the Earl of Wessex. He is the most powerful man in the kingdom, a seasoned warrior and a cunning statesman. He is English through and through. In a solemn ceremony at the newly built Westminster Abbey, Harold is crowned King of England. The crown is heavy on his brow, not just with gold and jewels, but with the weight of the storm he knows is coming. For news travels fast, carried on ships across the choppy waters of the English Channel. In Normandy, a powerful duke receives the message. His name is William. He is a man of iron will and relentless ambition. William claims that years ago, King Edward had promised him the English throne. He also claims that Harold Godwinson himself had sworn an oath to support his claim. To William, Harold's coronation is not just a political maneuver. It is a betrayal, a sacred vow broken. He sees Harold not as a king, but as a perjurer, a usurper. In the great halls of his Norman castles, William begins to gather his knights, his barons, and his resources. An invasion is no small task. It requires ships, soldiers, horses, and a mountain of supplies. But William is patient, calculating, and utterly determined. He will take what he believes is rightfully his, and the threat doesn't stop there. Far to the north, across the cold, gray expanse of the North Sea, another claimant watches and waits. He is Harold Sigurdsson, known to history as Harald Hardrada, the hard ruler of Norway. A giant of a man, a legendary Viking warrior who had fought and plundered his way from the frozen north to the glittering walls of Constantinople. Hardrada's claim is older, tied to a pact made between a previous king of Norway and a previous king of England. He sees England's turmoil as his golden opportunity, a final, glorious campaign to cap a lifetime of conquest. He begins to assemble a fearsome fleet of longships, gathering thousands of axe-wielding warriors, ready to sail and write their own saga in English blood. So, the stage is set. 3 kings, 1 crown. In England, King Harold Godwinson stands precariously on his new throne, looking south to Normandy and north to Scandinavia. He knows he is trapped, caught between 2 formidable enemies. The English people, the farmers in their fields, and the merchants in their towns, go about their daily lives, but the air crackles with tension. Rumors fly. People look to the skies for signs and portents. And then, it appears, a hairy star, a blazing comet, streaks across the night sky. To the people of the 11th century, this is no mere astronomical event. It is a terrifying omen, a divine warning of chaos, of fallen kings and bloody war. The fate of England hangs by a thread. The year 1066 will be a year of 3 kings, of 2 invasions, and of a single, fateful day that will change the course of history forever. The Norman conquest is about to begin. Harold Godwinson, now King Harold II, is no fool. He knows the wolves are gathering. His reign begins not with celebration, but with frantic preparation. He is a proven military commander, having fought numerous campaigns on behalf of the English crown, particularly against the Welsh. He knows the land, and he knows his people. Immediately, he issues a call to arms. The Fyrd, England's militia of free peasants and landowners, is summoned. These are not professional soldiers like William's knights, but they are men fighting for their homes, their families, and their king. Along the southern coast of England, from Kent to Cornwall, they gather. They build fortifications, they watch the horizon, their eyes scanning the grey waters of the Channel for the first sign of Norman sails. Harold places his professional soldiers, his housecarls, at the heart of his army. These elite warriors, armed with their fearsome long axes, are the bedrock of English military power, renowned throughout Europe for their steadfastness in battle. The spring of 1066 turns into a long, tense summer. The English army waits, and waits, weeks turn into months. The strain on resources is immense. An army of thousands must be fed, paid, and kept in a state of readiness. The men are farmers, and with every passing day, the need to return home for the harvest grows more desperate. Their fields, their livelihoods, and their family's survival depend on it. Harold rides among them, trying to keep morale high, but he can feel the tension fraying. He is in a strategic bind. He cannot afford to keep his army mobilized indefinitely, but he also cannot afford to dismiss it and leave the coast undefended. Meanwhile, in Normandy, Duke William faces his own challenges. Building an invasion fleet from scratch is a monumental undertaking. Hundreds of ships must be constructed or requisitioned. He has gathered an army not just of Normans, but of mercenaries and adventurers from all over France and beyond, all lured by the promise of English land and riches. But this vast, multinational force is a logistical nightmare to maintain, and then there's the weather. Day after day, an unfavorable north wind blows, pinning William's fleet in the port of Dives-sur-Mer. The same wind that frustrates William is a blessing for Harold, buying him precious time, but William uses this delay wisely. He keeps his army disciplined, he secures his supply lines, and he launches a brilliant diplomatic campaign. He seeks and receives the Pope's blessing for his invasion, reframing his war of conquest as a holy crusade against a perjured king. He will sail under a papal banner, a powerful symbol that lends divine legitimacy to his cause. Back in England, the long wait is taking its toll. By early September, with supplies dwindling and the harvest season at its peak, Harold has no choice. He makes a fateful decision. He dismisses the fyrd. The farmers are sent home to their fields. He keeps his housecarls with him and moves to London, gambling that the campaigning season is over, that the autumn storms will make a channel crossing impossible for William. It is a calculated risk, but a terrible one. Because just as Harold stands down his southern defenses, the wind changes. Not just for William, but for the other storm gathering in the north. News arrives, striking London like a thunderbolt. Harold Hardrada has landed. The Viking invasion has begun. The King of Norway, accompanied by Harold Godwinson's own exiled brother, Tostig, has sailed up the River Humber with a fleet of over 200 ships. They have already defeated a northern English army and captured the great city of York. Harold Godwinson is caught in the ultimate trap. The enemy he had been waiting for all summer in the south has not yet appeared, but a massive, battle-hardened Viking army is now rampaging in the north. He must act. In an astonishing feat of speed and determination, Harold gathers his housecarls and the loyal troops he can muster and begins a forced march north. They cover nearly 200 miles in just 4 days, a blistering pace for an army of the era. The fate of his kingdom now rests on a desperate race against time. He must defeat the Vikings in the north and then somehow get back south to face the Normans, who, he knows, could land at any moment. The board is set, the pieces are in motion, and the first brutal chapter of the war for England's crown is about to be written in blood and iron. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to see how this incredible story unfolds.
History isn't just what happened, it's what was hidden. Welcome to the Chrono Archives, where lost empires rise again, forgotten legends speak, and ancient truths are brought back to life. From world-shaping history and powerful myths to legendary rulers and timeless civilizations, every story here is carefully uncovered, deeply researched, and cinematically told. The past is calling, will you answer? Subscribe and journey through time, one unforgettable chronicle at a time.
The year is 1066, King Edward the Confessor is dead, and the throne of England hangs in the balance. 3 men believe it is their destiny to wear the crown, and the fate of a nation will be decided not by diplomacy, but by steel and sail. In Normandy, a storm of ambition is gathering. William, Duke of Normandy, is furious. He claims the English throne was promised to him, and he's not a man to be denied. All across his duchy, a monumental effort begins. Forests echo with the sound of axes as thousands of trees are felled. The coastlines transform into vast, bustling shipyards. The air is thick with the smell of fresh-cut lumber, hot tar, and the sweat of countless craftsmen. They are building an invasion fleet, the likes of which haven't been seen in generations. Shipwrights work day and night, their hammers ringing a constant rhythm of war. They are constructing longships, not for raiding, but for transport wide-bellied vessels designed to carry a new kind of army across the treacherous English Channel. And what an army it is! William is a master strategist and a magnet for warriors. From Brittany, Flanders, and even southern Italy, knights and mercenaries flock to his banner, drawn by the promise of land and glory. These are not farmers with pitchforks, they are professional soldiers, clad in chainmail, their faces hidden behind conical helmets. They practice endless drills, cavalry charges that shake the earth, shield wall formations that are nearly impenetrable, and the deadly art of the archer. This is a modern, combined arms force, a lethal machine honed for conquest. William's power is not just in numbers, but in organization and technology. He is building a logistical train to support his army, a floating city of men, horses, and supplies, ready to be unleashed upon England. The banners are unfurled, displaying the golden leopards of Normandy. The air crackles with anticipation. All they need is a favorable wind. Meanwhile, across the Channel, England's newly crowned king, Harold Godwinson, is not idle. He knows the Norman threat is real and imminent. As a seasoned warrior and the most powerful earl in the kingdom, Harold understands the art of defense. He begins to mobilize England's own formidable military machine. He summons the housecarls, his elite personal troops. These are some of the most feared warriors in Europe, professional soldiers who fight to the death for their lord. Wielding massive, two-handed battle axes, they are a terrifying sight, a solid core of disciplined veterans around which the rest of the army will form. But the housecarls are not enough. Harold also calls upon the Fyrd, the Anglo-Saxon levy of free men. From every shire, farmers, blacksmiths, and tradesmen answer the call to arms. They leave their fields and workshops, grabbing their spears, shields, and whatever armor they possess. They march to join the king's army, a river of men flowing towards the southern coast. Harold positions his forces along the coastline of Sussex, their eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for the Norman sails to appear. For months, they stand guard. The summer of 1066 is a long, tense vigil. The English army is strong, motivated, and fighting on home soil, but their greatest challenge is time. Can they stay mobilized long enough? The harvest season approaches, and the men of the Fyrd are needed back on their farms. The strain on resources is immense. Just as the English watch the south, a new storm breaks in the north. A third claimant, a true Viking king from the old sagas, arrives to stake his claim. This is Harold Sigurdsson, known to history as Hardrada the Hard Ruler, king of Norway, a famed mercenary who fought and plundered his way from Kiev to Constantinople. Hardrada is a living legend, a giant of a man with an insatiable appetite for battle. He believes he has a claim to the English throne through a deal made between his predecessor and a previous Danish king of England. With him is a surprising ally, Tostig Godwinson, Herald of England's own exiled and vengeful brother. In late summer, a fearsome Viking fleet, numbering over 200 longships, appears off the coast of Northumbria. They sail up the rivers Ouse and Humber, their dragon-proud ships striking terror into the hearts of the locals. They are not here to wait, they are here to conquer. They land, and their rampage begins. The northern English earls, Edwin and Mercar, hastily assemble an army to stop them. But at the Battle of Fulford Gate, just outside the city of York, the Viking veterans, hardened by years of warfare, smash the English shield wall. The northern army is shattered. The city of York surrenders to Hardrada. The news travels south like a lightning bolt. King Harold Godwinson, still on the south coast watching for William, receives the devastating message he is caught in a strategic nightmare. A Viking king has landed, defeated his northern earls, and now occupies one of England's most important cities. The Norman invasion he has been preparing for all summer has not yet come, but a massive threat is already on his soil. Harold is faced with an impossible choice. Does he stay south and wait for William, leaving the north to be ravaged by Hardrada? Or does he confront the immediate danger? For a man like Harold, there is no choice but to act. In a decision that showcases his incredible leadership and stamina, he decides to march north. He gathers his housecarls and the fittest men of the Fyrd and begins one of the most remarkable forced marches in military history. They cover nearly 200 miles in about 4 days, a blistering pace. They march day and night, driven by the urgency of the crisis. The fate of England now rests on their weary shoulders. As they thunder north, the Norman fleet in France, which had been held back by unfavorable winds for weeks, finally sees the weather turn. The wind, the notorious Protestant wind, as it would later be called, finally shifts. William gives the order. His vast armada sets sail for England. England is now trapped in a vice. King Harold is racing north to fight a legendary Viking warrior, completely unaware that the enemy he had prepared for all summer is now crossing the channel behind him. The island kingdom, which had known relative peace for decades, is about to become the battleground for 3 armies, each led by a man who would be king. 2 massive battles will be fought in the space of 3 weeks, conflicts that will shape the destiny of England and all of Europe for the next 1,000 years. The stage is set. The claimants have made their moves. The Great Clash of 1066 is about to begin. The year is 1066. England is a kingdom on a knife's edge. Its king, Harold Godwinson, has just been crowned, but his throne is far from secure. 2 powerful challengers, William of Normandy and Harold Hardrada of Norway, are gathering their forces, each believing the English crown is rightfully theirs. Harold knows this. He spent the entire summer on the south coast, his army poised, his eyes scanning the horizon for Norman sails. But as the weeks drag on and supplies dwindle, he's forced to make a difficult decision. He disbands his fleet and his militia, sending the men home for the harvest. It's a calculated risk, but a necessary one. England can't afford to keep an army indefinitely mobilized. Just as the south coast seems quiet, a storm of a different kind breaks in the north. News arrives, carried by frantic messengers on exhausted horses. Harold Hardrada, the thunderbolt of the north, has landed. And he's not alone. With him is a massive Viking fleet, over 200 ships strong, and a figure from Harold's own past, his estranged and exiled brother, Tostig Godwinson. Tostig, hungry for revenge and power, has thrown his lot in with the fearsome Norwegian king. They've already sacked Scarborough, burned it to the ground, and are now marching on the great northern city of York. The northern English earls, Edwin and Mercar, are brave, but unprepared for the sheer scale of the Viking invasion. They hastily gather their forces and meet the invaders at a place called Gate Fulford, just south of York. The battle is a brutal, bloody affair. The English Fyrd, mostly inexperienced farmers and tradesmen, fight with desperate courage. But they are no match for the hardened Viking veterans under Hardrada's command. The Norwegian army smashes through the English lines. The River Ouse runs red with blood as the northern army is routed. Edwin and Mercar manage to escape, but their forces are shattered. York, the capital of the north, is left defenseless and is forced to surrender. Hardrada is triumphant. He demands hostages from the city and the surrounding shire to secure their loyalty. He arranges for these hostages to be delivered to him at a place called Stamford Bridge, a few miles east of York, the Vikings, overconfident and basking in their victory, feel the campaign is all but won. The English north has fallen. They relax, shedding their heavy mail armor in the unexpected late September heat. They expect a simple handover of hostages, a formality before their final conquest. They have no idea what's coming. They have no idea that King Harold Godwinson, the man they thought was hundreds of miles away, is already on the move. When the news of Gate Fulford reaches King Harold in London, it must have felt like a hammer blow. His kingdom was being torn apart, but Harold is not a man to despair. He is a seasoned warrior, a man of incredible energy and decisive action. He doesn't hesitate. He immediately gathers his personal army, the elite housecarls professional soldiers, the best warriors in England. And then, he does something extraordinary. He begins to march, and what a march it was! Harold and his housecarls cover the distance from London to York, over 185 miles, in just 4 days. It's a feat of logistics and endurance that is almost unbelievable for the time. They are marching at a blistering pace of nearly 45 miles a day. Along the way, local militias, hearing of the king's approach and spurred by patriotism and fear of the Vikings, flock to his banner. By the time he reaches Tadcaster, just a day's march from York, his army has swelled in size. He has the element of surprise entirely on his side. The Vikings at Stamford Bridge have no scouts out, no sentries posted. They are completely unaware of the approaching storm. On the morning of September 25th, Harold's army arrives at Stamford Bridge. The sight that greets the Vikings is one of pure shock and disbelief. As they lounge by the River Derwent, their armor stowed away on their ships miles away, they see not a group of hostages, but a massive English army cresting the ridge. A cloud of dust, the glint of thousands of spear points and helmets in the morning sun. Panic erupts in the Viking camp. Harold Hardrada, the seasoned warrior, quickly assesses the situation. He sends a frantic message for his reserves and the rest of the army to grab their armor and march from the ships, but he knows it will take time. He must hold the bridge. The initial phase of the battle is a desperate, chaotic defense. A small contingent of Vikings holds the narrow, wooden bridge itself, fighting to buy precious time. Legend tells of one giant Norse axeman, a berserker, who holds the bridge single-handedly against the entire English army. He cuts down man after man, a terrifying figure of defiance. The English can't get across. They try to shoot him with arrows, but he swats them away. He seems invincible. Finally, a cunning English soldier gets under the bridge in a small boat or swill tub and thrusts his spear up through the wooden planks, mortally wounding the giant from below. The hero falls, and the bridge is finally taken. Now the main battle begins. The English army pours across the river and smashes into the main Viking force, which has hastily formed a shield wall. The fighting is savage and relentless. It is a clash of titans, the English housecarls with their great axes and spears against the Viking warriors. The air is filled with the roar of battle cries, the clang of steel on steel, and the screams of the wounded. Harold Godwinson is in the thick of it, leading his men from the front. Harold Hardrada, fighting without his mail shirt, his famous banner land waster flying above him, is a terrifying presence on the battlefield. He wields a huge two-handed sword, cutting a swath through the English ranks. But in the chaos of the fight, an English arrow finds its mark, striking the Viking king in the throat. He stumbles, chokes on his own blood, and falls dead. The thunderbolt of the north is extinguished. Tostig Godwinson, seeing his alive fall, is offered a truce by his brother Harold. But Tostig, filled with bitterness, refuses. He picks up the fallen Viking banner and urges the Norwegians to fight on. The battle rages. Just then, the Viking reinforcements finally arrive from their ships. They've run for miles, clad in heavy armor, and are utterly exhausted before they even join the fight. They throw themselves into the fray in a final, desperate charge, but their energy is spent. The fresh, organized English army overwhelms them. The Viking shield wall, which had held for hours, finally breaks. The battle turns into a rout, a massacre. The Vikings flee, but there is nowhere to run. The English pursue them mercilessly. The scale of the Viking defeat is staggering. Of the more than 200 ships that sailed to England, only 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. Both Harold Hardrada and Tostig Godwinson lay dead on the field. It was an absolute, crushing victory for Harold Godwinson. In a single, brilliant campaign, he had marched the length of his kingdom, surprised a formidable enemy, and utterly annihilated one of the greatest Viking armies ever assembled. He had secured his kingdom from the north. He was victorious. But as Harold stood on the bloody field of Stamford Bridge, amidst the bodies of his enemies and his own brave men, his triumph was short-lived. His army was battered and exhausted. His finest warriors were weary from the forced march and the brutal battle. And just as the celebrations began, another messenger arrived, breathless, his horse lathered in sweat. The news he carried was disastrous. Just 3 days after this incredible victory, while the north was still reeling, William of Normandy had finally landed on the south coast at Pevensey. Harold's ordeal was not over. It had just begun. He had won a battle, but now he had to turn his exhausted army around and march south once more to fight for his kingdom and his life all over again. The stage was set for the final, decisive confrontation at a place called Hastings. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most pivotal years, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next chapter of this incredible story. The morning of September 28, 1066, the sun rises over the Sussex coast, revealing a sight that would change England forever. A forest of masts has appeared overnight, a sprawling armada of longships and transports disgorging an army onto the shingle beach of Pevensey Bay. This is it. William, Duke of Normandy, has landed. His invasion, meticulously planned for months, had been at the mercy of the wind. For weeks, his fleet of over 700 ships, packed with thousands of soldiers, horses, and supplies, was pinned to the Norman coast by relentless northerlies. Every day of delay was a gamble. It gave his rival, Harold Godwinson, more time to prepare his defenses. But as fate would have it, that same wind had worked in William's favor. Just as William was trapped in Normandy, Harold was forced to march his army north. A second invasion, led by the fearsome Norwegian king Harold Hardrada, had landed near York. Harold Godwinson, the newly crowned king of England, had to make a brutal choice. He raced his men to 100 miles in under a week, and on September 25th, he achieved a stunning, crushing victory at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, killing both Hardrada and his own traitorous brother, Tostig. England was saved from the north. But as his exhausted soldiers celebrated, the winds in the English Channel finally turned. Now, 3 days later, as Harold's battered army begins its long, grueling march back south, William's forces are swarming ashore unopposed. The Normans aren't just landing, they're executing a masterclass in military logistics. There's no chaos, no panic scramble. This is the calm, disciplined work of a professional army. As the ships are beached, ramps are lowered, and a river of steel flows onto English soil. First come the archers, fanning out to secure a perimeter. Their eyes scan the low hills and woods, alert for any sign of English resistance, but there is none. The local fyrd, the militia, had been called up, but with Harold's army away in the north, they were no match for this force and had likely scattered. Then come the knights, the heart of William's army. Clad in mail from head to toe, they lead their prized war horses down the ramps. These destriers were the medieval equivalent of tanks, and transporting them across the Channel was one of William's greatest logistical triumphs. Each horse was a massive investment, a symbol of a knight's status and a devastating weapon of war. Behind them pour the spearmen, the foot soldiers, who immediately get to work. They aren't just standing around. Under the watchful eyes of their commanders, they begin the immense task of establishing a beachhead. The scene on the shore is one of organized, relentless activity. Men haul vast quantities of supplies from the ships, barrels of wine and water, sacks of grain, and crates filled with weapons and armor. Blacksmiths set up portable forges, the rhythmic clang of their hammers already echoing across the bay as they repair equipment and sharpen blades. But William's strategy goes beyond just securing a landing zone. He understands the psychology of war. He needs to do more than just occupy this stretch of coast. He needs to project an image of overwhelming, inevitable power. His men start by making use of what's already there. Pevensey was the site of an old Roman shore fort, its strong stone walls still partially standing. The Normans immediately begin reinforcing these ancient defenses, digging new ditches and erecting a wooden palisade. They are turning this Roman ruin into a formidable Norman castle, a secure base from which to operate. A story, perhaps apocryphal, but perfectly capturing the moment, is told about William himself. As he stepped onto the beach, he stumbled and fell flat on his face. A gasp went through the ranks. Was this a terrible omen? But William, a master of turning a situation to his advantage, sprang to his feet, holding to fistfuls of sand. "See," he bellowed, "by the splendor of God, I have taken England with my two hands." What could have been a moment of superstitious fear was instantly transformed into a declaration of destiny. This was the message he wanted to send, not just to his own men, but to the English. His invasion wasn't a mere raid, it was a permanent conquest. To prove it, he even ordered some of his ships to be burned. There would be no retreat. Victory or death were the only options. From this secure base at Pevensey, William unleashes another weapon, fear. He dispatches foraging parties into the surrounding countryside. These aren't just to gather food, they are a deliberate act of psychological warfare. Norman patrols ride through villages, seizing livestock and grain, burning homes and terrorizing the local population. The message is clear and brutal. Your king cannot protect you. I am here, and I am in control. Smoke rising from burning farmsteads would be visible for miles, a constant, terrifying reminder of the invader's presence. News of the landing spreads like wildfire, carried by panicked refugees. Rumors fly, each more terrifying than the last. The Norman army is said to be impossibly large, their knights invincible, their duke a ruthless monster. This wave of terror was just as important as the military invasion itself. It was designed to sow dissent, to weaken English morale, and to pressure Harold into a hasty confrontation. Meanwhile, King Harold, somewhere in the north, finally receives the dreadful news. He has just won one of the greatest victories of his life, only to be told that his kingdom is now threatened from the opposite direction. His men are wounded, exhausted, and hundreds of miles away, yet he knows he cannot wait. Every day William remains in Sussex, his position grows stronger, and English resolve weakens. So Harold turns his army around and begins the desperate march south. His soldiers, who had just marched 100 miles north, now face another 250 miles south. It's a journey that would break lesser men. They march through rain and mud, their wounds from Stamford Bridge still fresh. They are marching towards a fresh, well-supplied, and deeply entrenched Norman army. Back at Pevensey, after consolidating his position, William makes another strategic move. He marches his army a few miles east along the coast to the port of Hastings. Hastings offers a better harbor and a more commanding position on a high peninsula. Here, the process begins again, but on an even grander scale. Prefabricated wooden castles, which had been brought in sections from Normandy, are assembled with astonishing speed. Within days, a new fortress stands overlooking the sea, a stark symbol of Norman power and permanence carved into the English landscape. From this new base, the raids continue, becoming even more aggressive. William is laying a trap. He is deliberately devastating the lands that belong to Harold's own family, the Godwinsons. This is a personal insult, a direct challenge to Harold's authority and honor. William is daring him, provoking him, trying to force him into a battle on ground of William's choosing. The stage is now set. In the south, a confident and calculating Norman duke digs in, his army growing stronger by the day. To the north, a weary but determined English king marches relentlessly towards a confrontation he cannot avoid. The fate of England hangs in the balance, resting on the shoulders of these two men. The initial landing is over, but the true battle, the one that will echo through 1,000 years of history, is about to begin. The clash is inevitable. The only questions are where and when. If you're re-enjoying this series on 1066, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter, where we lines cover the final days leading up to the epic confrontation at the Battle of Hastings. See you next time. October 14, 1066, the sun rises over a small hill in Sussex, England. Senlac Hill, the name, some say, means Lake of Blood, a grim prophecy for the day ahead. On this ridge, King Harold Godwinson plants his banners. His army, exhausted from marching hundreds of miles and fighting another battle just weeks before, forms the backbone of England's defense, the legendary shield wall. Shoulder to shoulder, housecarls and thanes, England's elite warriors, lock their shields. Behind them, the Fyrd, a militia of farmers and freemen armed with whatever they could bring, stand ready. They are a solid, immovable wall of wood, steel, and English resolve. They know the Normans are coming. They are ready. Down in the valley, a different kind of army assembles. William, Duke of Normandy, stares up at the English position. He sees the wall of shields gleaming in the morning light, a formidable obstacle. But William is not a man easily deterred. His army is a modern, combined arms force, the likes of which England has rarely seen. He has archers with their deadly short bows. He has heavily armored infantry, men who fight on foot with sword and spear. And he has his pride and joy, the devastating force of the Norman knights, heavily armored warriors on powerful warhorses. William addresses his troops, his voice ringing with promises of land, wealth, and divine favor. The papal banner flutters beside his own, a symbol that God is on their side. He points his sword towards the hill. The objective is clear. Break the shield wall, kill the king, and England is theirs. The battle begins with a sound that would echo through history, the blare of Norman trumpets. A shower of arrows soars into the sky. William's archers open the engagement, hoping to soften up the English line. But they have misjudged the elevation. The arrows either fall short, harmlessly into the muddy slope, or fly over the heads of the English, embedding themselves in the ground behind. The shield wall holds, impenetrable. The English taunt the Normans from their high ground, their confidence unshaken. This initial archery barrage is a complete failure. William needs a new plan. Frustrated but undeterred, William orders his infantry forward. The foot soldiers begin the grueling uphill slog. The ground is wet and slick from recent rains, making the advance even more difficult. As they struggle up Senlac Hill, the English unleash their own terrifying barrage. Axes, spears, and even rocks rain down on the advancing Normans. The sounds of clashing steel and splintering would fill the air. The Norman infantry crashes against the shield wall like a wave against a cliff. With single, powerful swings, they can slice through a shield, a helmet, even a man and his horse. The attack is a bloody failure, and they begin to retreat back down the hill in disarray. Now comes the turn of the pride of the Norman army, the knights. With a thunderous roar, the cavalry charges. Hundreds of armored men on war horses gallop up the slope, lances couched, aiming to punch a hole in the English line through sheer brute force. This is the moment William believes will decide the battle. The ground trembles under the weight of the charge, but the English are prepared. The shield wall becomes a wall of spears, a deadly hedgehog of pointed steel. Horses, intelligent animals, refuse to charge into the solid wall of sharp points. Knights are unhorsed, their heavy armor making them vulnerable on foot. The elite of the Norman army is thrown back, just like the infantry before them. The shield wall has held against everything William has thrown at it. A rumor, swift and deadly as an arrow, spreads through the ranks: William is dead. The Breton mercenaries, seeing the failed attacks and believing their leader has fallen, break and flee. Panic becomes contagious. The entire Norman line begins to waver. This is the critical moment. If the whole army roots, the battle is lost. But William is very much alive. Tearing off his helmet so his men can see his face, he rides along the line, rallying his terrified soldiers. "I am here," he shouts, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "Look at me. I live, and by God's grace, I will conquer." Seeing their duke alive and fighting, the Normans regain their courage. The retreat is halted. The battle is not over yet. Seeing the Bretons flee, a fatal error is made on the English side. A portion of the English right flank, against Harold's strict orders to hold the high ground at all costs, breaks formation. Flushed with victory and eager to cut down the retreating enemy, they surge down the hill in a chaotic, undisciplined pursuit. They have fallen into an ancient, deadly trap. The Normans, seeing the disorganized English charging down the slope, turn. The Norman knights wheel their horses around and encircle the exposed English soldiers. Cut off from the safety of the shield wall, out on the open, flat ground, the English are massacred. They have abandoned their greatest advantage, the high ground, and they pay the ultimate price. William, a shrewd and experienced commander, sees what just happened. It was an accident, a moment of English overeagerness, but it worked. He now has his key to victory. He orders his knights to perform a series of feigned retreats. And time again, small groups of English soldiers, confident and eager, fell for the bait. They would chase the fleeing Normans down the hill, only to be turned upon, surrounded, and slaughtered by the waiting cavalry. Each time this happened, the shield wall grew a little thinner, a little weaker. It was a slow, brutal, grinding process of attrition. The battle has been raging for hours now. The sun is beginning to set. The field is a muddy, bloody mess, littered with the bodies of men and horses. Both armies are exhausted. The shield wall, though weakened, still stands. Harold Godwinson, fighting alongside his brothers and his housecarls, is still holding the line. William knows he must break the stalemate before darkness falls and allows the English to regroup or escape. He orders one final, coordinated assault. He tells his archers to change their tactics. Instead of firing directly at the shield wall, they are to fire high into the air, plunging their arrows down from above, over the top of the shields. It is a devastatingly effective move. Arrows rain down on the exhausted English from an unexpected angle. Men who had been protected by their shields all day are now exposed. The arrow storm creates chaos and casualties within the English ranks. And then, at the height of this arrow storm, fate intervenes. A single stray arrow, fired high into the twilight sky, comes down and strikes King Harold in the eye. The King of England falls, mortally wounded, right at the foot of his own standard. The heart of the English resistance is gone. With Harold's fall, the last bit of resolve in the English army shatters. The shield wall, which had held for so many brutal hours, finally collapses. Norman knights and infantry surged through the gaps, overwhelming the last pockets of resistance. Harold's brothers, Gyrth and Leofwine, are cut down fighting near his body. The loyal housecarls, in a final act of defiance, fight to the death around their fallen king, protecting his body as their final duty. But the battle is over. The Norman knights pursue the fleeing Fyrd into the darkness, cutting them down as they run. The field of Senlac has truly become a lake of blood. William of Normandy has won. He is no longer just the Duke, he is the Conqueror. And on this bloody patch of English soil, 1,000 years of history was changed forever. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more epic stories from history. The sun hangs low in the autumn sky, casting long, bloody shadows across the field of Senlac Hill. For hours, the battle has raged, a brutal, grinding contest of will. The English shield wall, a fortress of wood, steel, and flesh, has stood firm against wave after wave of Norman cavalry and archers. Men have fought and died, their screams and prayers lost in the cacophony of war. The ground is slick with blood, littered with broken shields, fallen banners, and the bodies of the slain. Hope and despair hang in the air in equal measure. This is not just a battle. It is the violent birth of a nation, and its fate rests on this ridge. The Normans, battered and bruised, had been on the verge of breaking. Twice they had faltered, their charges repulsed by the unyielding Saxon axemen. Twice, Duke William had to rally his fleeing troops, his helmet torn away to show them he still lived, roaring defiance against the English tide. But now, something has changed. William, a master of strategy forged in the crucible of countless French skirmishes, unleashes a new, cruel tactic. He orders his knights to charge, and then feign retreat. It's a gamble, a test of discipline against raw courage. The English, emboldened by their success and smelling victory, are lured into the trap. Pockets of the shield wall, mostly the Fyrd, the militia levies, break formation. With triumphant yells, they surge down the slope, eager to cut down the supposedly fleeing Normans, but the retreat is a phantom. The Norman knights wheel their powerful warhorses around, turning on their pursuers with vicious precision. The English, now exposed on open ground without the protection of their locked shields, are cut to pieces. On the ridge, King Harold Godwinson watches the disaster unfold. He roars orders, trying to restore the discipline that has served them so well all day. His personal guard, the elite housecarls, remain steadfast around him, a small island of order in a sea of growing chaos. They know the danger. The shield wall, the very backbone of their army, is beginning to fracture. Gaps are appearing, like cracks in a dam about to burst. William sees his opportunity. He points his sword towards the English standard, the golden dragon of Wessex and Harold's personal banner, the fighting man. There. He commands, his voice cutting through the din. Strike there, to the king. He gathers his best knights, a spearhead of iron and fury, and aims them directly at the heart of the English line, at Harold himself. At the same time, he signals his archers. All day their arrows have rained down, mostly thudding harmlessly into the high wall of English shields. But now, with the line wavering and men looking down the hill at the unfolding chaos, William gives a new command. He tells them to aim high, to arc their shots over the wall of shields, to let death fall from the sky. A new kind of terror fills the air, not the clang of sword on shield, but the high, whistling shriek of 1,000 arrows ascending as one. They blot out the setting sun for a moment, a dark, man-made cloud, then they fall. They fall like iron rain upon the heads and shoulders of the densely packed English. Men who had stood unbreachable from the front now cry out and collapse, pierced from above. The shield wall, already compromised, groans under this new assault. It is in this storm of steel that fate intervenes. The sagas and chronicles, written by the victors, will later tell a story that becomes legend. A single arrow, loosed from an unknown bow, arcs through the sky. It finds its mark, not in the shield of a common soldier, but in the face of the king. The story goes that the arrow struck Harold Godwinson in the eye, a mortal blow that brought the warrior king to his knees. Whether it was an arrow to the eye, as the Bayeux Tapestry seems to depict, or a brutal cut from a knight's sword in the final melee, the result is the same. The cry goes up, spreading like wildfire through the English ranks. The king is down, the king is fallen. The sight of their leader, the man who had marched them from a stunning victory at Stamford Bridge just weeks before, now collapsing beside his standard, is a blow from which they cannot recover. Panic, the soldier's most ancient enemy, takes hold. The discipline that defined the housecarls shatters. The fyrd, already wavering, breaks completely. The shield wall, the mighty fortress that had held for nearly 9 hours, dissolves not into a retreat, but a rout. All that is left is a desperate, heroic last stand. Around the fallen body of their king, the royal housecarls fight on. His brothers, Gyrth and Leofwine, have already fallen, but his personal guard refuses to yield. They are surrounded, hopelessly outnumbered, but they fight with the fury of cornered wolves, protecting the body of their lord to the last breath. They know there is no surrender, no escape. They are sworn to die with their king, and they sell their lives dearly, their great axes cleaving through Norman mail and bone until they are finally overwhelmed. As the last of the housecarls falls, a profound silence begins to settle over the hill, broken only by the groans of the dying and the triumphant shouts of the Normans. William's knights move across the battlefield, cutting down any remaining pockets of resistance. The English banners, the dragon, and the fighting man are torn down. In their place, the papal banner granted to William is raised, its cross gleaming in the twilight. A new flag flies over the English dead. Duke William of Normandy, his armor dented, his face smeared with sweat and blood, dismounts. He stands amidst the carnage, the victor of one of history's most decisive battles. He has gambled everything, his duchy, his life, his legacy on this single day, and he has won. The Anglo-Saxon age, an era of warrior poets and shield walls, has ended in blood on this Sussex ridge. The body of King Harold is so mutilated in the final struggle that it can only be identified by his wife, Edith Swan Neck, by marks on his body known only to her. The dream of an independent Anglo-Saxon England dies with him. The Battle of Hastings is over. The Norman conquest has begun. A new chapter in the story of this island is about to be written, not with ink, but with the sword. The Norman banners rising over the fallen English king signal more than just a victory in battle. They signal the end of one world and the violent, brutal beginning of another. The England we know today was born in this moment, forged in the fire and blood of 1066. Thank you for staying with us this far. Now we want to see what happens next, how William the Conqueror cemented his rule and changed England forever. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. The year is 1066. The dust has settled on the battlefield of Hastings, but for England, the storm has just begun. William, now the Conqueror, has a crown, but a country still seething with resistance. How do you rule a kingdom that doesn't want you? You don't just ask for obedience, you build it, stone by heavy stone. This is the story of how England was reforged in the fires of conquest, a new nation built on a foundation of Norman power. Across the English landscape, a new and imposing sight began to scar the horizon: castles. Not the wooden forts of the Anglo-Saxons, but towering keeps of stone, strategically placed to dominate the land and its people. From the Tower of London, a grim sentinel on the Thames, to the formidable structures in York and Durham, these were not just defensive positions, they were symbols. Each castle was a declaration in stone: we are here, we are in charge. And we are not leaving. Imagine the scene: Norman masons and English laborers, toiling side by side, but with a vast gulf between them. The English, often forced into labor, were building the very structures that would ensure their own subjugation. These castles were built quickly, often with the Maughtan Bailey design: a raised earthen mound with a wooden or stone tower, surrounded by a courtyard and a defensive ditch. They overlooked towns, river crossings, and major roads. They were constant, visible reminders to the local population of who now held the power of life and death. For the Norman knights who garrisoned them, these castles were islands of security in a hostile land, bases from which they could launch patrols and brutally crush any sign of rebellion. But William's conquest wasn't just about stone and steel. It was about a total political and social revolution. Before 1066, England was ruled by a powerful class of Anglo-Saxon nobles, the earls and thanes. They held vast estates, commanded great loyalty, and advised the king. Within 2 decades of the conquest, this entire class was virtually wiped out. Their lands were seized, and their titles extinguished. Some had died at Hastings, others in the brutal rebellions that followed, and many more simply fled into exile, seeking refuge in Scotland, Denmark, or even the Byzantine Empire. In their place, William installed his own men, the Norman, Breton, and Flemish barons who had fought alongside him. The Domesday Book, a monumental survey completed in 1086, tells the stark story. It reveals that only a handful of major Anglo-Saxon landholders remained. The rest of the country's wealth and land had been redistributed among roughly 200 of William's most loyal followers. This wasn't just a change of landlords. It was the birth of a new aristocracy, a French-speaking elite ruling over an English-speaking populace. The very language of power changed. In the halls of government, in the courts, and in the castles, French became the language of the rulers, while English became the tongue of the ruled. This massive transfer of land cemented a system that we now call feudalism. While elements of it existed in Anglo-Saxon England, the Normans imported their own, more rigid and centralized version. The concept was simple: all land ultimately belonged to the king. He granted large parcels, or fiefs, to his most important barons, his tenants-in-chief. In return for this land, these barons owed the king military service. They had to provide a quota of knights for the royal army, ready to fight whenever called upon. These great barons, in turn, subdivided their lands and granted them to lesser lords and knights, who then owed them military service. At the very bottom of this pyramid were the English peasants, the vast majority of the population. Their lives were now tied to the land and to the new Norman lord who owned it. They worked the fields, paid rents and taxes, and were subject to the lord's justice. Their world had shrunk to the boundaries of the manor, their fates decided by a foreign master whose language they didn't even understand. This new social order was designed for one primary purpose: control. It created a clear chain of command, from the king at the top down to the humblest knight. It ensured that William could raise an army quickly and efficiently to put down rebellions or defend against foreign threats. It also meant that the entire structure of English society was now geared towards supporting a military, landowning class. Justice, loyalty, and wealth all flowed upwards towards the king, the ultimate source of all power and land. The immediate aftermath of the conquest was brutal and disorienting for the English people. Their leaders were gone, their lands were taken, and their culture was suppressed. Norman knights patrolled the towns, their foreign tongue and arrogant demeanor a constant source of friction. The Harrying of the North, a horrific campaign of devastation unleashed by William between 1069 and 1070 to crush a northern rebellion, left vast swaths of the country desolate, with reports of starvation and cannibalism. It was a clear and terrifying message: resistance would be met with annihilation. Yet, this period of trauma and upheaval also laid the groundwork for the future of England. The Norman system, for all its brutality, brought a new kind of centralized authority and administrative efficiency. The new ruling class, while alien, eventually began to merge with the population they governed. Over generations, the lines would blur. French and English would meld to create the language we speak today. The Norman and Anglo-Saxon traditions of law and governance would fuse, creating a unique political culture. The castles, once symbols of oppression, would become iconic features of the British landscape. The Norman conquest was not just an ending for Anglo-Saxon England. It was a violent, transformative beginning for the nation that would one day build an empire of its own. If you found this journey into the past fascinating, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. The year is 1066, a single day, a single battle, on a hill in Sussex. But the echoes of the Battle of Hastings would thunder down the centuries, reshaping not just an island nation, but the very course of European history. This isn't just a story of a battle won or lost. It's the story of how that day created the world we know. Welcome, and today, we explore the profound and lasting legacy of Hastings. Before the Normans arrived, England was a land with deep Anglo-Saxon roots and a strong connection to Scandinavia. Its language was Old English, a Germanic tongue that would be almost unrecognizable to us today. Its aristocracy was a complex web of earls and thanes. But William the Conqueror's victory didn't just bring a new king, it brought a new world order. The Anglo-Saxon elite was almost completely wiped out, replaced by a French-speaking Norman aristocracy. Land, power, and influence were seized and redistributed. This was a seismic political shift, a hostile takeover on a national scale. England's gaze, once turned towards the North Sea, now pivoted decisively towards continental Europe, and specifically, towards France. This political revolution gave birth to a new social structure, feudalism. To reward his followers and secure his new kingdom, William implemented a system where all land ultimately belonged to the king. He granted large estates, or fiefs, to his most trusted barons in exchange for military service and loyalty. These barons, in turn, granted land to lesser knights, who then had peasants, or serfs, work the land for them. This rigid, hierarchical system locked society into place for centuries. It concentrated immense power and wealth in the hands of a few, embedding the monarchy and aristocracy at the heart of English governance. Grand castles, like the Tower of London or Windsor Castle, began to stud the landscape not just as homes, but as stone symbols of Norman domination and control, projecting power over the conquered populace. Perhaps the most personal and enduring legacy of the Norman conquest was its impact on language. For nearly 300 years, French became the language of the royal court, of law, of government, and of high culture. English was relegated to the common folk, seen as the tongue of the uneducated. But it didn't die. Instead, something remarkable happened. The two languages began to merge. The sturdy, earthy grammar of Old English provided the skeleton, while a flood of Norman French words added flesh and sophistication. Words for government like parliament, crown, and state. Legal terms like judge, jury, and evidence. And words for food like beef, pork, and venison all poured into English. This fusion created the wonderfully rich, flexible, and expansive language we speak today, a hybrid tongue with a vocabulary far larger than either of its parent languages. Without Hastings, Shakespeare would have written in a very different language, and we might be speaking something closer to modern Dutch or German. But how do we know so much about this pivotal event? We have a truly unique historical document, the Bayeux Tapestry. This incredible, 70-meter-long embroidered cloth isn't actually a tapestry, but it's a masterpiece of storytelling. Commissioned shortly after the battle, likely by William's half-brother, it depicts the events leading up to the conquest and the battle itself in stunning, vivid detail. It's a piece of Norman propaganda, for sure, designed to justify the invasion. We see Harold swearing an oath to William, and then breaking it, positioning him as a treacherous oath-breaker. But it's also an invaluable window into the 11th century. We see the ships, the armor, the weapons, the clothing, the hairstyles. It's like a medieval documentary frozen in thread. The Bayeux Tapestry immortalized the Battle of Hastings, ensuring its story would be told and retold for 1,000 years. The impact of Hastings rippled far beyond the shores of England. By tying England so closely to France, the conquest set the stage for centuries of conflict and rivalry between the two nations. The English kings, now also Dukes of Normandy, held vast territories in France. This dual identity created an inherent tension that would erupt into major conflicts like the 100 Years' War. The fight for control of French lands would dominate European politics for much of the Middle Ages. Furthermore, a strengthened, centralized, and militarily formidable England became a new major player on the European stage. It was no longer a peripheral island kingdom, but a powerhouse that would go on to build a global empire, a destiny directly traceable to the ambition of one Norman duke.
As we close this chapter of the Chrono Archives, remember, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently in the shadows of forgotten ruins, in the echoes of ancient voices, and in the timeless lessons that still guide us today. It waits to be remembered by curious minds like yours. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the annals of time. If today's exploration of lost civilizations, mythical legends, or historical enigmas ignited your passion for the past, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment or what you'd love to see next, and most importantly, subscribe to the Chrono Archives and continue the journey through time. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode where we unearth buried secrets, decode ancient mysteries, and bring history's greatest stories back to life. Together, we'll keep the flame of the past burning bright. Until next time, fellow time travelers, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep remembering. The Chrono Archives, where the past lives forever.